There is a moment that almost everyone has experienced. You are in a conversation with someone. At first, it seems normal. They are asking for something, explaining something, maybe even apologizing. But slowly, the shape of the conversation changes. You begin to feel pressure, not direct pressure, not someone physically forcing you, not someone openly saying, "Do what I want." It is quieter than that. You start feeling guilty for saying no, selfish for having boundaries, cruel for asking questions, confused about what actually happened, responsible for emotions that do not belong to you. And by the end of the conversation, you are somehow agreeing to something you did not want, or apologizing for something you did not do, or comforting the person who hurt you. That is when you feel it. Something in the conversation was not honest. Something was being moved, not by force, but by pressure. And we usually call that manipulation. But the strange thing about manipulation is that it is not always as simple as one bad person trying to control one innocent person. Sometimes it is conscious. Sometimes it is automatic. Sometimes it is cruel. Sometimes it is desperate. Sometimes the person doing it knows exactly what they are doing. And sometimes they have done it for so long that they no longer recognize it as a tactic. They just call it communication. Most people imagine manipulation as something cold and calculated. A person sitting in a room, planning every word. They know exactly which emotion to trigger, which insecurity to touch, which memory to bring up, which silence to use, which version of themselves to perform. And yes, that kind of manipulation exists. Some people manipulate deliberately. They understand that guilt works. They understand that fear works. They understand that confusion works. They understand that if they make you doubt yourself, you become easier to steer. But that is not the only form manipulation takes. In many people, manipulation begins much earlier than strategy. It begins as survival. Imagine a child who learns that asking directly never works. When they say what they need, they are ignored. When they express anger, they are punished. When they say no, they are made to feel guilty. When they are honest, they are laughed at, dismissed, or emotionally abandoned. So the child learns something, not consciously, not in words, but in the body. Directness is dangerous. Need is shameful. Honesty is not safe. So instead of asking, they hint. Instead of expressing hurt, they punish with silence. Instead of saying, "I am afraid you will leave," they create a situation where the other person has to prove loyalty. Instead of saying, "I need reassurance," they start a fight to test whether someone will stay. And over time, this becomes a pattern, a way of getting needs met without ever admitting the need. That is one of the uncomfortable truths about manipulation. Some people manipulate not because they are powerful, but because they feel powerless. They do not trust direct communication to work, so they use indirect pressure instead. But does that make it harmless? No. Understanding where manipulation comes from does not erase what it does. A person can learn a behavior from pain and still use it in a way that hurts others. A person can be afraid and still be controlling. A person can have trauma and still create trauma. That is where many conversations about manipulation become difficult. Because once you understand the reason behind someone's behavior, it becomes tempting to excuse it. You start thinking, they do not mean it. They had a hard childhood. They are just scared. They cannot help it. They are not doing it on purpose. And sometimes those things may be partly true, but the effect still matters. If someone repeatedly makes you feel responsible for their emotions, your freedom is being reduced. If someone uses guilt to make you comply, your choice is being narrowed. If someone twists the conversation until you are always the one defending yourself, reality is being rearranged. Whether they call it manipulation or not, the result is the same. You are no longer responding freely. You are being managed. So do manipulators know they are manipulating? The answer is uncomfortable. Some do. Some do not. And some know only when it benefits them not to know. There are people who are fully aware. They understand exactly what they are doing. They know they are guilt-tripping you. They know they are withholding affection. They know they are exaggerating pain to control your response. They know they are framing your boundaries as cruelty. They just believe their goal matters more than your autonomy. But there are also people who genuinely do not experience themselves as manipulative. In their mind, they are just trying to be heard, trying to avoid abandonment, trying to protect themselves, trying to get reassurance, trying to make the other person understand. They may not see the hidden equation underneath their behavior. If I make you feel bad enough, you will give me what I need. That is the difference between expressing pain and weaponizing pain. One says, I am hurt and I want you to understand me. The other says, I am hurt and now you are not allowed to have a boundary. One useful way to think about manipulation comes from a 1987 study by psychologist David M. Buss and his colleagues Mary Gomes, Dolly Higgins, and Karen Lauterbach. They did not look at manipulation only as something rare or extreme. Instead, they studied the everyday tactics people use to get others to start doing something, or to stop doing something. Across 2 studies, they found several recurring manipulation tactics. Some were obvious, like coercion, but others were much quieter. Charm, silent treatment, reasoning, regression, and debasement. That is what makes manipulation so difficult to recognize. It does not always look like control. Sometimes it looks like being extra nice. Sometimes it looks like withdrawing. Sometimes it looks like helplessness. Sometimes it even looks like logic. The study also found that people showed consistency in the tactics they used across different situations. In other words, manipulation is often not just a single moment. It can become a personal style, a repeated way of trying to shape the behavior of others. And that raises an uncomfortable question. If someone has learned that a certain tactic works, why would they stop using it unless they are forced to become aware of what it does? This is why manipulators often get angry when their manipulation is named, because naming the pattern breaks the spell. Manipulation works best when it remains invisible. It hides inside normal language. I guess I just expected you to care. Do whatever you want. After everything I've done for you, I am not mad. I just think it says a lot. You're being selfish. I never said that. You're too sensitive. I was only joking. Fine, I will just stop talking then. Each sentence can be innocent in the right context, but in the wrong pattern, these sentences become tools. They do not invite honesty. They create pressure. And when you say, "This feels manipulative," the person is suddenly forced to look at the mechanism, not just the emotion. That can feel humiliating. It can feel like exposure. It can feel like being seen too clearly. So the reaction is often anger. Not always because the accusation is false, sometimes because it is too accurate. If a person's entire strategy depends on not being noticed feels like an attack. But this raises a strange question. If manipulation means trying to influence another person, then is every conversation manipulation? When you ask someone for help, are you manipulating them? When you tell a sad story because you want comfort, is that manipulation? When you make a joke to make someone like you, is that manipulation? When you explain your side of an argument, are you trying to control how they see you? And if so, is that wrong? This is where the word manipulation becomes blurry, because human beings are always affecting each other. Every conversation changes something. We speak because we want a response. We share because we want to be understood. We explain because we want reality to be seen from our angle. We comfort, persuade, invite, apologize, flirt, negotiate, complain, confess, and ask. Human communication is full of influence. But influence is not the same as manipulation. Influence leaves the other person free. Manipulation quietly removes freedom while pretending not to. Influence says, "Here is what I feel. Here is what I want. You can decide." Manipulation says, "If you do not decide the way I want, I will make you pay emotionally." Influence respects the other person's reality. Manipulation tries to replace it. Influence can handle a no. Manipulation treats no as a problem to solve. That may be one of the simplest ways to recognize the difference. A request becomes manipulation when the other person is punished for being free. So does everyone manipulate? In small ways, probably yes. Most people have, at some point, shaped a story to sound better, stayed silent to make someone worry, acted colder than they felt, exaggerated helplessness, used guilt, played innocent, withheld information, said, "It is fine," when they wanted the other person to suffer from guessing. Human beings are not perfectly honest creatures. We are social animals with fear, ego, insecurity, hunger for belonging, and a deep need to be seen in a certain way. So yes, almost everyone has manipulative impulses. But that does not mean everyone is a manipulative person. There is a difference between a moment and a pattern. A moment can be noticed, owned, and corrected. A pattern defends itself. A moment says, "You are right. I was trying to pressure you. I am sorry." A pattern says, "I cannot believe you would accuse me of that." A moment leads to responsibility. A pattern leads to reversal. That is why one manipulative act does not always mean you should immediately remove someone from your life. But how they respond when it is named tells you more than the act itself. If they become curious, there is hope. If they become accountable, there is safety. If they become furious, mocking, dismissive, or turn themselves into the victim every time, then you may not be dealing with a mistake. You may be dealing with a system. And systems repeat. If someone manipulates you in one area, could they manipulate in others? Possibly. Because manipulation is rarely about the topic. It is about the method. Today the subject might be your time. Tomorrow it might be your money. Later it might be your friendships, your boundaries, your memory, your guilt, your sense of self. The content changes, the structure stays the same. Pressure, confusion, guilt, reversal, punishment, reward, distance, affection, silence, crisis, apology, repeat. That is why it is important not only to listen to what someone says, but to watch what their conversations do. After speaking with them, do you feel clearer or more confused? Do you feel respected or managed? Do you feel free to disagree or afraid of the emotional consequences? A manipulative conversation often leaves behind a strange aftertaste. You may not be able to prove what happened, but you feel smaller than before. So what if you notice manipulation in yourself? That may be one of the most important questions, because it is easy to study manipulation as something other people do. It is harder to notice the moment you are the one applying pressure. The first step is not to hate yourself. Shame often makes manipulation worse because shame hides. Instead, ask, what am I trying to get without asking directly? Am I trying to make someone feel guilty because I'm afraid they will say no? Am I punishing silence because I do not know how to say I feel hurt? Am I exaggerating helplessness because I want someone to rescue me? Am I creating conflict because I need reassurance? Am I making my emotions someone else's responsibility? The antidote to manipulation is not becoming emotionless. It is becoming direct, not aggressive, direct. I feel insecure and I need reassurance. I want help, but I know you can say no. I am hurt, but I do not want to control you with that hurt. I am afraid of being abandoned, but that fear is mine to handle. I was trying to pressure you. I am sorry. Directness is frightening because it allows rejection. Manipulation avoids rejection by making rejection expensive. That is why stopping manipulation requires the ability to tolerate not getting what you want. You cannot become honest if you believe every no is a threat. So what is an acceptable amount of manipulation? Maybe the answer is not a number. Maybe the real question is, what happens after it is noticed? A relationship does not need two perfect people. It needs two people who can repair. Everyone has defensive patterns. Everyone has fears. Everyone has ways of trying to protect themselves from pain. But not everyone is willing to see them. A single manipulative moment, followed by awareness, apology, and change, is very different from a repeated pattern followed by denial and punishment. The danger is not that someone once acted from fear. The danger is that they protect the tactic more than they protect the relationship. That is when manipulation becomes more than a mistake. It becomes a way of organizing reality. One person's emotions become the law. One person's version becomes the truth. One person's needs become the center, and the other person slowly learns to disappear. Maybe the most disturbing thing about manipulation is that it hides inside normal human needs. The need to be loved, the need to be heard, the need to not be abandoned, the need to matter. Those needs are not wrong, but when a person cannot ask for them honestly, they may try to extract them indirectly. And that is where intimacy becomes control. A request becomes a trap. Pain becomes a weapon. Love becomes a negotiation. And conversation becomes a room with no visible door. So no, not every conversation is manipulation. Wanting to be heard is not manipulation. Needing comfort is not manipulation. Asking for help is not manipulation. Trying to influence someone is not automatically manipulation. Manipulation begins when honesty is replaced by pressure, when choice is replaced by guilt, when the other person is not being invited, but cornered. And maybe the hardest truth is this: the opposite of manipulation is not silence. It is clean communication, the ability to say, "This is what I want. This is what I feel. This is what I fear." And you are still allowed to choose. Because the moment someone is no longer allowed to choose freely, the conversation is no longer just a conversation. It has become control. And perhaps that is the question we should ask more often. Not, did this person get what they wanted? But, what did they do to reality in order to get it? Did they make the truth clearer? Or harder to see? Did they respect your no? Or punish it? Did they speak honestly? Or build a maze and call it love? Manipulation is not always loud. It does not always look evil. Sometimes it looks like sadness. Sometimes it looks like need. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like a person who says they only want to talk, while quietly making sure you cannot leave the conversation unchanged. And once you learn to see that pattern, you may begin to notice it everywhere, in others, in relationships, in families, in arguments, in advertisements, in politics, and, uncomfortably, sometimes in yourself. So the question is not whether humans influence each other. We do. Constantly. The question is whether that influence leaves the other person more free or less free. That may be the line. That may be the difference between connection and control. So if this video made you think of a conversation, a relationship, a family pattern, or even a moment in yourself, leave a comment below. Where do you think the line is? When does normal influence become manipulation? And have you ever noticed someone punish your no without ever openly saying they were doing it? If you enjoy videos like this, strange psychology, hidden social patterns, uncomfortable questions, and theories about why people behave the way they do, consider liking the video and subscribing for more. Because the most dangerous form of control is not always the one that forces you. Sometimes it is the one that makes you believe you chose it freely. And maybe that is the real question. Did they change your mind? Or did they make it harder for you to trust your own?